Collègues, excusez-moi, bonjour. Est-ce que Bruno Lamour est déjà ici? Bruno, si vous êtes là, venez chez moi, s'il vous plaît. I'll show it for.
Can I speak? You have my voice? Good morning, everyone. Oh, good class. You respond. I hope you have a nice morning. I hope you had a great day yesterday and that we're going into an even better day. This is a special day in very many ways. Some of you have sort of felt where we're from, the union movement already today. There's a lot of union activity going on in Belgium today. You're living in the hotel, you don't notice it, but you may hear it later, that there are major demonstrations going on today and rallies. They are, as far as I understand, it has to do with revising their pension systems, which you may recognize from other countries. The metros are only partially running, the buses aren't running very well, and we also have the pilots of Brussels Airlines that have chosen this day to have industrial action. So I hope not too many of you are flying out with Brussels Airlines today. And the practical advice is, if you're leaving the airport, be there in good time, because the baggage handlers may also be affected. But this is our movement. This is what we live for, so we can manage this. And we even have some activism in the room. Free Lula, I see over here. Lula Libre. So we have our things that we have to put on the agenda, and we have our slide here, World ESP Day, 16th of May, 2018. A first-timer we can be proud of. And by the way, my name is Haldis Holst. I'm Deputy General Secretary of Education International, and have the privilege of opening this second day, and will be with you for a while through the day. I listened to Sean yesterday and found that very interesting. I thought he gave a very good perspective of a professional view of why everyone who works in or in connection to the education system is important to be able to realize our view of what education is, our view on how learning happens, what learning is, that cannot happen solely due to one group of professionals, or that it can happen solely by the student or learner on their own. I believe that education support personnel also are extremely important for us to recognize, to have emphasized on, also as trade unions, because this is both about that their rights and conditions of work are just as important as the teachers that traditionally has sort of been the core of many EI affiliates, but also because of the basic view of the right to organize for everyone, that we all have a responsibility to make sure that everyone has access to a trade union, whether it is our own or whether it is another trade union, because they have the right for someone to collectively protect the rights. I'm a teacher. Through my career, it has hit me several times how it would be absolutely impossible for me to do a good job on my own, or only along with my other teaching colleagues. I started my career, I'm Norwegian, in the utmost north of Norway, in a fishing village. And you may think that I'm now going to talk about the indigenous population. I'm not, because that happened not to be a traditionally indigenous village, as we would call it, but I could have spoken about that in the same respect. But in that fishing village, there was quite a large group of Finnish-speaking children, that we called newly immigrated Finnish-speaking children, because there's also an old group that we called the Quains that migrated from Finland up towards Norway a long, long time ago. But these were new generations, been there for the first generation or second generation. At that time, I was very proud that I worked in a municipality that invested in employing what they called, we had some mother tongue teachers at school, but specifically in the early childhood education institutions, they employed what they called language trainers. Now, they were not just language. They were not teachers, but they bore a special knowledge of culture, of history, that there was no way any of the trained teachers, of whom none spoke Finnish or had a Finnish background, could give to those children. That was sort of my first experience of, oh, I'm so glad they're here, otherwise I would have fallen through. We need people with the specific knowledge, and no one can bear all the knowledge. Then I moved on to a school farther south in Norway, not far from Oslo, in the capital of Norway. And at that time, there was a wave across the country where I'm sure all of you experienced we have to become more efficient in our working. And who was vulnerable to which groups when it came to looking at possibilities for efficiency? What was the first thing they did? They took the group of, call them janitors or caretakers at the school, that used to be one at each institution. And they made a centralized pool of them in the municipality and thought this was very efficient. The school could just call, we need this repaired or we need this fixed. They'd lost the point, because these people were the heart and the soul of the school. They owned it. They were the kind of people that would drive by in the evening just to check that their school was okay. They were the one that was closest to the students when they scraped their knees or fell down from the tree or wanted help to build a tree house. They were the ones that had those one-on-one conversations with the students that we as teachers very often didn't have time for. We suffered. The school didn't only lose the immediate repair, they lost their support system for their students. What was the next thing they did? The next wave. That was outsourcing. Outsourcing of services to the private sector to save your budgets. You thought you were going to save money and become more efficient. Which group did they take? They took the people who cleaned the school. These people that used to move in when we were finished teaching, they would move in. And they were there for the kids that chose to roam around the school after school hours or forgot something. They knew them. They didn't only outsource, they turned cleaning over to a day service. That was supposed to happen in between lessons in the classrooms. So suddenly there was no one there for those kids. And they were not the same people. There used to be people who'd been at the school for 20, 30, 40 years. And now they were sent to one municipality one day, another place another day. And it was quite clear that very often the support services that were not seen as teaching services, that many saw as the core business of the school, were the most vulnerable. And I have to admit that we as a trade union did not see the full consequences of this for the quality of the education that we wanted to provide for the children, and we have to change that. And that's part of what I hope we can do through launching something like a World ESP Day. The world isn't going to change because of a day. We have to give the day content. It can't be a one-on, that's sort of, oh, the 16th of May we get together and say, hey, it's ESP Day. But it is an opportunity for you to go home and give it content, for us to give it content from Education International, make sure that it's a day where people feel valued, where they get the spotlight on their work, where it's showcased, that it's not invisible, but it's shown to their colleagues, it's shown to the community, it's shown to society, along with the whole child, whole school, whole community approach. This is what we do, so you can feel proud. I got a feedback that yesterday there were a lot of interventions that many don't feel recognized. And what really hit me then is, that's the same story that teachers tell us. And if you're working side by side several groups that don't feel recognized, and perhaps don't even feel recognized by each other, then really it's about time to join forces. You have to make sure that you have that day where you're valued, where you're recognized, where you show the community and you show your colleagues what you're doing, but you also have to make sure that you do something tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. When you only jump once a year, nothing's going to change. It can be a nice party, but it won't change society. And this can work. I've seen it work. I've seen it work in my own union, where we launched internally a day for early childhood education, which we thought was undervalued. It started as an internal union day where we tried to focus on early childhood education. Today, the society, the media, everybody sees it. I think it's about 10 years have gone past. As, oh, this is a national day for ECE. It's not the union's day, it's the country's day for early childhood education. That's what we want the ESP Day to become. We want the ESP Day to be just as important as World Teachers' Day. And sometime in the future, it may even be the time to make that one day that is the day of education workforce that we're making focus on. But we have work to do before we come there. This is a great start. This is following up on a Congress resolution. This is EI trying to step up and do what they should have done many years ago, focusing on education support personnel. But we're doing it now, and we will continue to do it. And you go home and make sure that your unions focus on education support personnel. And then we have to get the unions that do not organize education support personnel to find their models on how they can value education support personnel and work together within their society. The answer may not be that all unions open their door to education support personnel, because traditions in countries are different. You have models of how you organize, and what we don't do in the trade union movement is go around pouching each other's members. But we can speak to each other and say, how can we cooperate to have a common focus on a very important group? So we're talking about education and all people that work in connection to education, whether it's 2, 3, 4, or 1 union that are doing it. We know one voice is much more powerful than diverse voices, because then the authorities and the employers can just take one step back and you can split them and play them out against each other. That won't happen. I hope that this day will be valuable for you to further be motivated, to further get ideas on what you're going to do when you go home. And we are listening, taking notes, and we will bring that with us when we develop our next step. So feel that you're celebrating all day. Feel that you're valued all day. Feel that you really want to go home and show the world how important you are and the work you do, and all your colleagues that are not here. Because right now they are even more invisible than you are, because they're not here. And to share the opening of this day, I would like to invite some union colleagues from the affiliates to come up and speak. And I think I would like to start with Lula Libre. I would like to start with Fatima de Silva from CNTE Brazil. If you would join me up here, Fatima. Or do you want to speak from there?
Wearing a lot of technology right now. Buenos días a todas. Voy a hablar en portuñol, intentando hablar más en español. ¿Ok? Buenos días a todos y a todas. Es un honor para América Latina estar en este momento acá presente con todos los educadores, con todos los profesionales a través de la Internacional de la Educación, celebrando este día. Celebrando la primera realización de la Conferencia Internacional de Apoyo Educativo. Brasil quiere compartir con todos y con todas la experiencia nacional en la lucha por reconocimiento profesional de este importante segmento de la educación. La transformación de los trabajadores administrativos de las escuelas en agentes educadores es resultado de una concepción pedagógica y, en primer lugar, ha puesto de relieve su papel profesional en ámbito escolar. Y este papel de educador está sobre la trípode de tres ejes de la política educativa, que pasa para que el sector tenga formación adecuada, valoración profesional y planes de carrera. En Brasil, en ámbito de nuestras representaciones sindicales, la correspondencia a esta idea de identificar el trabajador administrativo de la educación también como agente educador en el espacio escolar se dio a través de un proceso de construcción política. Y esta comprensión hizo que los meados de los años 80, a través de la CUT, de la Central Única de los Trabajadores, discutimos la idea de una organización sindical por ramas de actividad económica, a fin de superar la antigua visión fragmentada de organización. Fue en este contexto que nuestra organización solamente de maestros pasó a partir de 90 a ser la organización de trabajadores de la educación pública, junto con profesores, con maestros y también con todo el segmento de personal de apoyo administrativo. Pero, sin embargo, fue a partir del año de 2003, con el gobierno de Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, que los trabajadores de apoyo educativo en Brasil conquistaron reconocimiento en la ley como profesionales de la educación, además de obtener una política de formación de los profesionales administrativos de las escuelas, en el programa Profuncionario. En un esfuerzo de diálogo entre la CNTE y el gobierno, propusemos diferentes matrices curriculares de referencias para que se incorporase então nuevas políticas públicas de áreas del sector educativo. Por primera vez, este sector pasaba a tener visibilidad en las políticas públicas de educación. Neste sentido, celebramos la primera conferencia mundial promovida por la Internacional de la Educación, que nos supone a todos nós um grande desafio para dar visibilidade política a este segmento de la educação de fundamental importância em la formação de nossos niños e jovens adentro de las escolas e também adentro de las universidades. Somos educadores, assim é como merecemos ser tratados, tanto em nossas políticas sindicales internas adentro de nossas organizações, como en las políticas públicas de educación en nuestros países. Valoramos de suma importancia la definición política de la IES celebrar el 16 de mayo como el Día Internacional Mundial del Trabajador de Apoyo Educativo, como una estrategia central para dar visibilidad política al colectivo y para dar visibilidad política a este segmento que está organizado adentro de la Internacional de la Educación. Y nosotros y nosotras, en cuanto Brasil, en cuanto CNTE y en cuanto América Latina, estamos aquí no sentido de aprender, pero también de aportar y cambiar este importante momento que estamos compartiendo y dividindo en la Internacional de la Educación. Por valoração profissional, por formação adequada, por reconhecimento político dentro de nossas organizações e adentro de los governos em los países que hacemos partes, digamos, somos todos e todas educadores. Que viva el 16 de mayo como el Día del Trabajador de la Educación de la Internacional de Educación. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Thank you, Fatima. It was a strong voice from Latin America. You heard some strong stories from North America yesterday. I'm sort of a story, or my stories were European. We will shortly later today hear stories from, I think, from Asia Pacific or from New Zealand. But we need an African voice. And to share some thoughts on ESB, I have to have my notes here so I get your name right, Sylvester, especially your surname, Mutindindi. don't know if that was right, but Secretary General of Zimbabwe Educational, Scientific, Social and Cultural Workers Union. Sylvester?
Thank you, and good morning, colleagues.
Good morning.
How are you this morning? Okay, as already been said, my name is Sylvester Mutindindi. I come from Zimbabwe. My union has already been mentioned. To start off, colleagues, I just need to inform you that in our case, our country attained independence in 1980. And at the time we attained independence, there was no trade union movement that represented this sector. And in terms of arrangements, there are two groups of employees under ESP. Those that are employed by government and those that are employed by the private sector. And you may know that in Zimbabwe, the majority of schools are private schools, starting with church-related schools, then private schools, and now they are individually owned schools. And for the private sector, where we come from, the sector was considered as a domestic sector. We can equate it to your maids in your households. Despite the fact that in schools you find a variety of functions that are being performed. So at independence, government promulgated one minimum wage for all the workers, which was $30. Irrespective of what you do in a school. And with time, that then saw the formation of our union. Our union started or was formed at the University of Zimbabwe, starting off with the lecturers at the university. Though the university is a government institution, the employees who are employed at the university were not considered as government employees. And so the lecturers also felt they needed representation. But again, at the independence, there was only one university in Zimbabwe, which was the University of Zimbabwe. And in terms of capacity to run a trade union, it was not possible. So through consultation with the Labour Federation, which is the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions, it was then discovered that apparently there were a lot of schools across the country which also required representation. And then it was decided to form a broad-based union representing the non-teaching staff in schools, as well as employees who are employed by what we call non-governmental organizations. So there were basically two sectors that then came together to form a trade union. And at the time, the legislation would not allow the process of registration until 1985, when we then had the first ever Labor Relations Act. That's when our union was then registered. It was initially registered as Zimbabwe Education, Welfare and Mission Workers Union. Soon after its the registration, it was also then discovered that there were other sectors that had been left out, but which sectors had to do with education, research institutions as an example. And so therefore the name was changed to the current name, ZESCU. What's interesting is in 1985, that's when we started having what we would call employment regulations, which were governing the working conditions of employees in this sector. As I told you, in 1980, the workers were considered as domestic workers. We have moved on from 1985 up until government disbanded what they called employment boards, which were run by government for purposes of negotiations of the conditions, to put in place what are now called employment councils. These are bipartite bodies which have representatives from trade unions and employers associations. And our association, our NEC was registered with the ministry in 1996. I'm happy to inform you, colleagues, that at its formation, or at its first negotiation, there were apparently only 7 grades of employees in the sector. And as I stand before you, we've just concluded a job evaluation process for the industry, which has now come up with 13 different job categories for employees within the sector. I will share with you through our coordinator. I'll be giving the documentation that relates to the job titles, including detailed job descriptions for all the work that is being done in our schools in Zimbabwe. Obviously, we still have serious challenges in as far as classification of the ESPs are concerned. In that, we are predominantly private. We have an independence government used to employ ESPs in government schools. And since 1989, when the government of Zimbabwe got assistance from the International Monetary Fund to come up with what they called Structural Adjustment Program, they then had to do away with all the ESPs in schools. The government initially wanted to subcontract what they call school development associations, which is bodies composed of parents. But subsequently it was discovered that the government did not have the resources to continue paying, because the IMF said to the Zimbabwean government, its core function is to provide education. Other ancillary services in schools should be done by the parents. And as we speak, we have a situation where those of our ESPs in government schools, though not employed by government but employed by parent bodies, are apparently worse off than the ESPs in private schools. It's really worrying, because it appears the government is also supporting that situation. In our case, we actually have a problem with government because we are accused all the time of negotiating conditions that at times are seen to be more favorable than teachers. Indeed, it's true that in our case, we do have our ESPs who are earning well above teachers. It's through the negotiations that we carry out. But the difference is, there is difference between the employers. The teachers are not employed by the private sector, they're employed by the government. And as we speak, you may have heard of the economic situation in Zimbabwe. It's not possible for the government to simply increase salaries because it doesn't have the resources. We are expecting, obviously, with changes taking place and perhaps elections sometime by the end of the year, that there would be some improvement. But the situation, as far as teachers are concerned, is very dire. Recently, our colleagues in Zimta had a conference in Vic Falls in Harare, in Zimbabwe, sorry. And as we speak, schools opened last week for the second term of 2018. They were all threatening to go on strike. And the government was threatening to dismiss all the teachers. Notwithstanding the fact that you find a teacher earning less than the ESP in schools. Of course, what is important at the end of the day is the government ended up giving in and announced the salary increase for now not only the teachers but all civil servants. As far as our work in the task force is concerned, we are very grateful that as Zimbabwe, we have had the exposure. When this project started in Zimbabwe, we thought we were alone. We are so grateful to the assistance that we have been given by not EI, starting with IFTU. We started joining the ITS under the name International Federation of Free Teachers Unions before the two bodies changed to become EI. And we remain committed to remain a member of EI and also contribute meaningfully to the work that EI is doing worldwide. On the day of the ESP, and I agree with my colleague that we need to look at it broadly and say, should we have differentiation between ESP or teachers? I would subscribe to the notion of having one day that we both teachers and ESP celebrate, because our cause is the same. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Sylvester, for that. And I noticed what you said. You're not alone. None of you are alone in this room, and I think that's an important message for you to take home. No one is alone. We now have a day where we can make it visual that we are all together. And also remember that you and very many of your colleagues are in the hearts and the souls of the students, the children that have passed by you through your working days. They remember you. And that is the most important feedback and value you can have. Feel that in your heart through the day. And now I'd like to give the floor to Jane Porter, who's going to chair you through the day. Thank you very much.
Buenos dias. Hello. Makade. G'day. Good milkin. Bonjour. Ohio gozaimasu. Howdy. Atamarie. Ko Jane Porter tokuinga no Aotearoa New Zealand aho. I am Jane Porter. I've come over here from New Zealand, Aotearoa New Zealand. It's my pleasure and privilege to be your chair for the day. It's good news or bad news depending on who you are. Apologies in advance to the translators. I will try and speak slowly. You can decide at the end of the day whether it's good or bad news. What I heard in that session, and just before I introduce our keynote speaker, was that we have so much in common, and it's a day of celebrating the things that we contribute. So yesterday, a whole lot of people said, who is in the room? We want to try just a little exercise to see who's here, sort of a bit of a wave or a celebration. So I'm going to call out some categories, and if they apply to you, I want you to leap up loud and proud and say, I work in tertiary or early childhood or primary or secondary or admin, and the rest of us are going to acknowledge and cheer for you. It also gives you a chance to think, that person over there works in higher ed and I want to